happy holidays, and whatever else you might appreciate or enjoy during this time of year. Anyways, I thought I would share some of my workflow today. Don't have much else going on other than cooking and waiting. So what I'm going to do is do a little bit of Chat GPT work. This is what I've been kind of focusing in on for the last few months. I have interspersed other content in between, but I wanted to show you something that's kind of unique and kind of fun to do with Chat GPT. So without further ado, this artwork here was actually created with Chat GPT. Turned out pretty well. You can see it doesn't have the weird eyes, the distorted fingers, that sort of stuff anymore. It looks almost like something you would find in a role-playing game product. So this was something I made with Chat GPT, and then I uploaded it into Canva so that I can make other content with it. And then when I was done, I imported it into Fantasy Grounds and converted it for use and whatnot. So this is my Chat GPT session, and I called it Quest Givers, but it didn't start off that way. It was actually kind of an accident, which is probably your best attempts at doing anything creative with this program, because it really does it lend itself to your creativity. It can do quite a bit of things that are interesting for creating content, especially if you're doing like homebrew or anything like that. So I'm going to go back to the beginning and I'll kind of show you how this conversation evolved. It was going to start off as just like a big bad evil guy. See, I said create a female big bad evil background, history, appearance, personality, motivation, all that kind of stuff. Well, then what had happened is that it decided to, and I said Dungeons and Dragons, and I did say Forgotten Realms. So what does it do? It takes Valindra Shadowmantle, which is an actual lich from the canon lore from the Forgotten Realms, and it made her a human sorcerer, just stole that name. And then it gave her a background, which I didn't have so many problems with this stuff. It just kind of struck me as, I don't want to use a formal name. And then when I was going to read through this, it looked kind of cliche. So I wasn't too pleased with this output, even though I gave it this direct command here. So what I did is I said, okay, let's back this up for a sec. And it wasn't bad. I mean, it wasn't horrible. It just too cliche. It's like something I could have made up myself. It's wasn't really helpful. So I'd put down as a response to that, I don't mind this character, however, it seems too cliche, and the name is taken from the name of an actual powerful and well-known lich character in the lore of the Forgotten Realms fantasy world. So it responded in kind and said, okay, understood, let's create a more unique and less cliche character for your campaign, ensuring originality in both background and name. So it made this character named Sylira Windweaver. She's a half-elf, she's a warlock essentially, and it gives me this backstory of how she was born in the mystical city of Silvery Moon. It kind of goes into explaining her history. It says that her mother was an elven scholar of ancient lore, and her father a skilled diplomat. So those two instilled a deep appreciation for knowledge and the delicate balance of power within. So Sylira's life took a dramatic turn, though, when she discovered a hidden grimoire, so it's like this magic book, belonging to a long-forgotten archfey. This encounter led to a pact that granted her extraordinary magical abilities, but at a cost that remains a closely guarded secret. So she kind of gave up some of her mortality for this thing, which it doesn't really say that, but that's kind of what my perception was. But anyways, it gives her a nice appearance, personality, motivation, and some character development. So this was kind of a pleasant surprise. I said, okay, I'll run with it. I'm not going to fight it, and it's not really a big bad evil guy. It's just a powerful source or a warlock. So it had some character development. It has some role in the campaign, what her duties might be, or what it is that she might bring to the table. And then it was talking about how we were talking about her pack patron and her power source. So the pack patron's name is Sylira, the Whispering Wind. So she's a kind of a fae, archfey kind of entity. It goes into explaining the nature of the pact and how that book came into play. And then we talked about this base timeline here in the Forgotten Realms world. So it was up to 1489 DR. So it talks about her life path and, you know, when she was born and when all these different events took place for her. Right now she's in her 40s. And then it kind of goes into, you know, basically what happened to her for her history. And then I said to research these events in the timeline and briefly notate her role or response to regional events. So with the rise of Tiamat, Storm Kings of Thunder, Princes of the Apocalypse, I mean, it kind of has some lore here as to what her role was in those particular campaign settings. So even though we didn't role play her or use her character throughout any of these, she still had an indirect impact or a role on those events. And being that she was in Silvery Moon, she wasn't directly involved with most of it. I didn't put anything about the Orc Wars, which would probably be my next foray into developing this NPC or this character. So then I wanted to detail the Grimoire, which is the way that she got the Pact of the Tome, which essentially gives her more magical abilities and ability to study, and also details her education. So this talks about the Whispering of the Gale, which is the book. So this is an ancient tome bound in ethereal blue leather with pages that seem to ripple like wind-blown leaves. Its contents are written in a mix of Elvish and Sylvan, with intricate illustrations depicting various aspects of wind, weather, and the Feywild. So I got to change her name because her name was Sylira Moonwood or Moonweaver. So now after this evolved into another character or backstory, essentially Sylira Moonweaver is now called the Whisper Weaver, and her whole thing is kind of like based on the wind and that sort of thing. So then I made this D&D stat block for her as an NPC, and it's got her spells and her traits and also her background and that sort of thing. So I put that all into Fantasy Grounds. So if I go bring this up, this is kind of some of the information that I got out of this conversation, which is pretty extensive. This is a lot more than I normally do. But essentially, this is the NPC stat block that I imported into Fantasy Grounds. And then here's the other tab that has all the particulars. And then here's the image that I use, which I linked to her to the back of the NPC. And then this little summary here, I use that for her description in the story, which will eventually go into a book for the reference manual builder. And then I'll even put like what is this? The backstory and all that stuff that we were talking about earlier when I first came on the show. So then it kind of goes into all that stuff. And I'm thinking what I might do with this is create a book that has like a dozen different NPCs that are like quest givers. And they could be, I think I'll make them a little bit more generic. So this one's very specific to the Forgotten Realms. But if, you know, it depends on where you release it. So if I were to put something out like this on the DM's Guild, I could do that. And then later on ask Doug and, you know, if they wanted to allow it to be in the store, on the Fantasy Grounds store once it's on the DM's Guild. Or I can keep it very generic and not give formal names and places and just kind of make these more generic that you can plop into any particular fantasy setting for D&D. So I might do that because that's actually a lot safer, a lot less hassle. So nonetheless, this is just for myself at this point. So I just kind of started building content based off of the evolution of that conversation. So I didn't plan it. And I think that's one thing that we kind of get hung up on when we're using these generative AI tools, is we're trying to force the AI tool to do what we want, as opposed to using the AI tool creatively and kind of going with it. And I think that actually works out better in the long run. You're not as disappointed, you're not fighting it, you're not getting pissed off, you're kind of going with what it gives you and allowing it to kind of nudge you into a kind of a creative direction. So it does like, I could say, okay, now let's do the stat block. So it did that. Like, I asked it to do that, and I gave it the parameters. It did that, and it did it kind of its own way, but I did give it some parameters. Like, I wanted her to have a longbow and a dagger, and then she has some of the features of a half elf and those sort of things. So I was able to kind of nudge it in the right direction without forcing it. And then I was able to generate artwork based off of the description that it gave. And this was the initial artwork, which I really like this, but she looks too young here. Maybe this is when she was younger. But nonetheless, this is kind of a really nice picture how this turned out. So I might use it in another spot. But there again, it's just kind of, and then this one was a little bit too anime looking. Like, I didn't care for the face. Everything else looked great, but I just said, nah, that's too anime. So this one looks a little bit better, but I didn't like the 20-sided die, so I actually had to edit that out. And then this one actually turned out the best, I think, overall, because it kind of depicts her magic, and it doesn't look too overly anime looking, and it looks like something you'd see in a book. So that turned out really good. So what I might do is ask the program in a little bit to create her grimoire, which has a description earlier on in the conversation. So here I'm updating and revising the stat block, and I actually changed her name to Sylira Windweaver. So it started off as Moonweaver, but decided that Windweaver was more fitting for her. And then this talks about her past and how she can provide adventurers with quests. So she's kind of high level, like a CR 10 spellcaster, 11th level warlock. So as an NPC, patron, and quest giver, Sylira Windweaver can serve several roles. So she can be a sponsor, she can provide quests, she can be a source of knowledge, or she can also supply them with magic items and equipment. And then for an ally in battle, she can do, like, for a high level epic battle, maybe like later on, she'll show up and help them and give them spellcasting support, become a strategic advisor, or even emergency assistance in a critical situation. So you can have her show up in different key parts of your adventure and kind of use this as your patron, as someone who gives your party quests. And it kind of makes more sense, because a lot of times you'll get the quest giver versus patron. So quest givers kind of just are like your bartender. You don't really know much about them other than their name. Maybe you get a picture of them. Maybe you know that he's married or something like that, but you don't have all this stuff. This could be a little bit of overkill too, but at least she has some teeth. It's got some volume in here. And it does all kinds of things to lend itself to helping you craft your adventure and to supplement your homebrew game. So if you were new to Dungeons & Dragons or to role-playing games, and you wanted to have like a detailed quest giver, this might actually give someone a starting point. That way they don't have to come up with everything from scratch. A lot of people, they don't have the time, or they don't have the confidence or the experience to do something like this. So using this type of tool, it can help with that sort of thing. And I was thinking I would make like a book or some kind of accessory that has, like, a dozen different quest giver / patrons, but more on the patron side. I think quest givers are kind of a dime a dozen, and depending on the context of your adventure, those work well for like one shots or or something unimportant. But when you have an ongoing campaign and your party has someone that they report to or someone that supports them, it's nice to have more backstory. So I thought, this would be like a Fey magic user, and then a different type of support might be sovereignty or some kind of king or queen or something like that, where or a prince, maybe you know more about their backstory than normal. Maybe you're a friend of them or something like that. But this kind of gives the story a lot more engagement, and it helps to develop your characters, and the NPC itself can also evolve and develop too. But if you have some structure and you have some form of organization in regards to who this person is, how they came to be, where they live, all those sort of things, it kind of lends to being able to role play more and not worry so much about, oh, what am I going to call this NPC? What's the name of it? So you can get stuck right there, not being able to come up with a name, which is probably the hardest part, to be honest. So in doing this, I got this conversation going kind of randomly. And as the conversation evolved, I just started asking more questions and making suggestions and that sort of thing. So in this case, like one of the other things that came up was Sylira's Windweaver's political ties and affiliations can greatly influence her interactions and the resources she offers. So in this case, she knows the Harpers. She supports them occasionally. She's not part of their group, but she's known to ally with them, whether it be information or, whatever the goal is. If they're aligned with her vision and stuff, then she'll help them occasionally. The Emerald Enclave, she's rumored to be affiliated with them. You also suggest she might be involved in quests related to the natural balance and threats to the ecosystem, because that's kind of what they're about. The Ladies College on Silvery Moon is a big university type thing. She's a respected alumni and a donor. She has access to exclusive knowledge and arcane resources, which could be really important for a research-based quest, at least for starting off, or to access rare information. And with her prestigious library access, she might have elite libraries that she can source rare books, maps, or even historical records for adventures. So this NPC kind of now comes alive because she has a function, not just someone who gives you gold if you complete a mission. It's someone who can supply you with information, someone that can give you like a potion every now and then, and sometimes show up and help you fight a big bad evil creature or something like that. So it kind of gives a little bit more teeth to having an NPC that has some involvement in your player's adventure. I wouldn't overdo it, like have too much of this, but it's nice to have this information in the background ready to go. And if you can't think of anything, or you have a weak spot in your adventure, or a lull, or maybe in between adventures, this sort of thing would really work well. And it would probably take off a lot of time in the interim when you're trying to create your adventure as you go, kind of thing. So then I even put something on here that had happened to her in the past to give her a little bit more complexity. So she does have some arch enemies, probably some rival warlocks or mages. They either envy her power or knowledge, or maybe they're entities from the Feywild who would oppose her because she has a half-human heritage. Some dislikes. So she doesn't really care for people who recklessly exploit magic or nature, particularly those who threaten the balance of the Feywild, because she's all tied up in that. Some past mistakes is she perhaps, in her early days, when she was discovering herself, she might have misused her powers that had unintended consequences, shaping her cautious approach to magic. So she's a little bit traumatized over the early days of her spellcasting, when she didn't have as much control over it. She has some regrets. So her human impulsiveness might have led to decisions that endangered her or others, contributing to her current wisdom. So she's done some things in the past that she kind of regrets. And then she had a failed love interest in a fellow scholar or an adventure that ended due to her duties or the complexities of her dual heritage and pact. So she might have been with someone for a while in her younger days, but she's no longer with that person. So these are just things that kind of you can add to embellish the backstory, the background. you can pick and choose like which ones you want to use. You can make up your own, you can throw some out, whatever you want to do. Then I created these tables for lower level tier characters, and I might do like, low level, mid level, and high level tiers. So you have quest starters, which are actually adventures. They're short adventures, probably one shots. You have errands, which you can do in between these adventures or just kind of use them to try things out. Basically, deliver a sealed letter to a secretive Harper agent at the Dancing Goat Tavern, which is in Silvery Moon. So these are short little errands that she might have you go out and do, especially when you're lower level. This would be something you could do in between, or if you can't think of anything, that would be great. Because these ones up here are a little bit more involved, like a mysterious illness is spreading in a nearby village. Investigate its source, rumored to be a contaminated well guarded by strange creatures. So that's actually more of a quest or an adventure, whereas these other ones are just kind of like short little jaunts into town, or they can escort a visiting dignitary safely through the city to a meeting at the council hall. So in that case, you might have a little skirmish on the way there, but it's not like a whole adventure. And then there's this rumor thing that she might have if you ask her about any current events or recent events or historical things. Like for one of the rumors is the hidden grove in the Moonwood is said to be a gateway to the Feywild. So she probably knows about that, but she might give you that hint. Or another lore-friendly rumor is the ghost of an elven princess is seen wandering the ruins of an old fortress, mourning his lost love. So these are just kind of like regional rumors. They may or may not pan out to anything, but at least it gives you some content to provide your players, and maybe even tip you in the direction of setting up a whole campaign around it. It's just really hard to say. But they're just kind of like quest starters, errands, rumors, just things to have at your disposal when you're running a campaign or a long-term adventure, because it really sucks when you are in the middle of a campaign and you don't really have as much details about an important NPC or maybe even another player. So these kind of things would be helpful if you were playing like in Silvery Moon and you were doing an adventure in there. This would help. So that's where locating these NPCs in different areas and also making them a little bit more generic would kind of be handy. This one is very focused in Silvery Moon, the Silver Marches in that area. So these are just the tables, and I imported those into Fantasy Grounds. And if I go into Fantasy Grounds now, go to tables, it didn't take me much to put those in because of the import tool. But like here's a table of errands. So instead of just having a list that you pick from, you can also roll. So I can roll the die. And this one says, here's the escort the dignitary to the town council hall. So having these tables kind of gives you that randomness if you can't decide which ones or which quests that you want to give your players. So it's kind of nice to have little things like tools like that at your disposal. And what's nice is she has her stat block. So if you were going to get into a big conflict with like a dragon or something, maybe she'll show up and rescue everyone or something like that. So this might be useful for that. But essentially, these are just some things that I've come across randomly. I didn't even plan this. This is all just me starting a conversation that had nothing to do with what I got now. And then I took that idea and ran with it and just kind of kept building on it. And now, lo and behold, I got all this really neat content that has inspired me to want to build more NPC quest givers that actually have backgrounds and functions and backstories, and they have all that goody stuff in there. I might even make some treasure parcels, like she might have a couple potions she can give you, those sort of things. So when you're a game master and you're playing, you got all that stuff ready to go. You're not digging through the whole adventure looking for one item. You pretty much got everything there at your fingertips. So for implementing a long-term patron, or maybe a quest giver like Sylira Windweaver into your campaign, you can offer some various benefits and considerations. So one is the role in the campaign. You determine how central this patron is to the main plot, or they can be deeply involved, or perhaps working against a big bad evil guy or girl, or having their own agenda. Or they might even offer side quests to help enrich the story. It's frequency of interaction. So you have to decide how often the patron's going to interact with the party. Regular contact can be established through in-person meetings, magical communication, or intermediaries. So you can do that throughout the quest. Types of assistance. So you consider what resources the patron has. Information, quests, monetary rewards, magic items, whatever. But the key balance thing is that too much assistance might overshadow the party's efforts. So you kind of have to do that sparingly as you're adventuring. For communication methods for long distance, magical items like sending stones or spells like sending can be used, or you can use a raven, or however you want to do that. Influences on the plot. The patron's influence should align with their interests and capabilities. They could have significantly sway in certain regions or fields, affecting the larger plot indirectly. So it kind of depends on the adventure or the story you're making. Information sharing. So this is kind of an important one. So decide how forthcoming the patron is with information. A balance between giving enough to guide the players and withholding enough to keep the mystery is ideal. So you don't want her to give everything away just because she's their patron. As a matter of fact, there may be some secrets or some kind of lore that she doesn't want the players to have, because either they haven't gained her trust, or maybe they're not powerful enough to handle the information. But you can't handle the truth is kind of what I'm thinking. Like maybe she can't, just dispose, or she can't dispense that information. So in researching this, I found out that I already kind of knew this, but the D&D rule set introduced these kind of patrons in the Eberron Rising of the Last War, and then they further elaborated in Tasha's Cauldron of Everything. So if you own that book, in Chapter 2, they go into this sort of thing where you can develop a backstory, and this is the lore in Tasha's in the GM section under group patrons. So you have aristocrats, and then you have a criminal syndicate. So it could be like a thieves guild, a sovereign. It could be a leader or some kind of lord, or something like that. But then they have tables in here to give you kind of like what type they are, which I think is fine, but that's still a lot of work to develop after that. So if you already have some NPCs that are developed for certain regions already, and they represent certain factions or certain ideals, or maybe they are part of the adventure itself, that will be a little bit more targeted to the adventure. So it depends on how much detail you put into and how much work you're willing to do. But this is a good start, and this talks about how to incorporate them. This is some of the how they can be bound together by the quests, and they have to kind of embark on these adventures together, and they may share this common benefactor, or in this case it would be like a patron or some kind of supportive information person, or maybe it's just someone in their guild. It could even be a mercenary company, whatever you want. It's like a military force in this case. So these would be really well placed. I think they'd be kind of helpful for people who run games, because a lot of times you have content that is basically for the GMs only, and it's kind of strictly just rules and accessories that are mainly just to supplement the game, and then you have the story itself, and there's not too much in between. So something like this, if you built it and designed it to be interactive with players, but also as a tool for GMs, it really fills in that niche spot that I think is kind of missing in a lot of cases, especially in adventures that are poorly written or that weren't originally designed to be a quest, but you want to use it as one. Something like this would be very helpful. And I don't think it's the answer to everything, but it definitely lends itself to making a smoother campaign and to save you some time. And if it's themed with the adventure that you're running and it makes sense, you can always tweak it a little bit, but essentially this would be a lot of that heavy lifting done. And I think that there isn't enough of this type of stuff out there. I looked on the DMs Guild and some of the past releases, not a whole lot out there like this. I mean, they give you monsters, they give you adventures that have quest givers in it. They give you, NPCs that you can plug in wherever, but they're really not targeted for this sort of thing. And I honestly think that this would make a good supplement overall, not just for D&D, but any type of campaign setting where you make like a dozen quest givers and then you detail them and then you theme them for whatever content you're working on, or you can make one that's more loose, that's not as specific. I kind of like the more detailed ones because you're going to get a lot more out of it, but nonetheless, if you need that flexibility to switch it between campaigns or rule sets, I mean that's another thing you got to think about. But as far as playing and using content, this would really help a lot, because I know there's kind of a hard thing is to come up with names, and then to have this kind of rich background, it can sort of shoehorn you into a certain direction. But if you're experienced enough and you've played for long enough, you know how to kind of get around that or how to change it to your liking. So you don't have to go with what's here. You can kind of change that as you go. So that's all I'm doing here is just taking Chat GPT, kind of letting it go, kind of let it ride, and then allowing for the creative part to come through and directing it just a little bit so that you're kind of getting somewhat what you want, but you can't really tell it what to do. You can suggest, you can prompt it, it'll try, but it's never going to be perfect. And when you can accept that better, it'll go better for you. You build a adventure around the content instead of trying to build the content from ChatGPT around a concept that you already have going on. It's harder to do that. So this would just kind of lend itself to the creative side of things instead of trying to force it to do what you want. So this is all kinds of really cool stuff, but I wanted to make kind of like almost like a mechanic or like some way of dealing with this patron system. So you'd have progression of the revelations of information. So as the party completes more quests, the patron reveals more and more about themselves, their motives, their plans. So that's kind of a no-brainer, but it is kind of cool, like a progressive thing. You unlocked additional resources. So as you gain trust and you've worked with this individual, it can lead to access to better resources, such as higher quality gear, more complex and rewarding quests, or even more valuable contacts. So that's really cool. Deepening personal connections. So with regular interactions, or at least occasional ones, and with the success of missions, it could lead to more of a personal bond where the patron shares personal stories or even seeks advice from the adventurers for themselves. Involvement in a larger plot. So the patron might gradually involve the party in more significant plot critical missions as their trustworthiness is proven. So I kind of wanted to make like not really a mechanic, but a way to handle patrons, or at least a way to kind of gauge it and to stage it up so that you're not getting everything at once. And it's kind of like, basic stuff. And then for the content, like I was saying earlier, you'd start with like errands, you get assignments, major quests, and then direct involvement. So these could be your different stages of how you're able to interact with your patrons. Is kind of like just a loose outline of how you might want to introduce or add or change, but you would still have this to kind of fall back on if you needed reference. And then you have a distinct role between a patron and a quest giver. So patrons are more deeply involved, they're integrated in the campaign's narrative, they kind of have a long-term relationship with either the region or the party. They provide recurring support or appearances or resources and sometimes guidance. Their involvement is typically tied to a broader story arc, and they may have personal goals or agendas that will align or influence with your party's journey. So that's the difference. And quest givers are more transactional, means you do this, you get that, and they may not have an ongoing relationship with the party. They offer specific tasks or missions, usually in exchange for immediate rewards like money or items. Quest givers can be a part of a single storyline or unrelated to the main plot, often serving as a source for side quests or maybe one-off adventures. So that's kind of more what you get from most adventures is these quest givers, because they want the flexibility for the GM to be able to go in and rewrite these or to kind of tailor it the way they want. But I think if you have more of a focused patron after you start a campaign, a long-term campaign, I think it really helps the narrative, and it really keeps things together. And it's nice to have the backstories and all that stuff to play off of. So basically, what this would accessory, if I made this an accessory, what it would break down to is I'd have the NPCs and define their background, personality, motive, appearance, their stat block, their role as a patron, and then some rollable tables for like the quests, the errands, the themed and lore-friendly rumors, that sort of stuff. The mechanics, like how to implement the long-term contract, progress in engagement levels, so just like different amounts of how much the patron and the PCs interact, and then also make the distinction between the patrons and the quest givers. And then for additional elements, you can put in political ties and affiliations for specific locations or regions or even a setting. And then you would also give some information about their enemies or dislikes, regrets, past mistakes, veiled love interests, just to give the NPCs a little bit more of a human or, more of a natural background, and gives it more intrigue. And it could be a tool that you use to kind of leverage for the players to kind of one-up their patron occasionally when they need to coerce them into giving them information. So then you have character development, campaign integration tips, and some visual aids like tokens and action scenes and that sort of thing to kind of flesh it out. So this is a kind of how this turned out. I wasn't expecting it. I'm kind of bored sitting around waiting for the festivities to begin, and I decided to do a little work in Chat GPT, and then it kind of motivated me to enter all this into Fantasy Ground. So now, with all that information I kind of went over, now I kind of have this starting point where I have all this information that's set up for for this particular NPC, and it's quite a bit. There's like 6 pages worth of stuff. A lot of this is probably overkill, but I would definitely want to have more than less. So this is like the stat block, the image, and then we go into all that lore, and then I have the tables set up. So it just kind of really, depends on how you want to present your data, and then also, what your needs are for your campaign. So this is just kind of a really cool way to use Chat GPT to help you design and come up with ideas for your games and that sort of thing. So this talks about Sylira's patron, like where she gets her magic from, and then there's some optional lore where how that Sylira met the person who gave her magic. So you just have this huge like backstory type thing, or it's not huge, but it's pretty big. And of course, there's the patron and the quest givers. And then for the history and roles, it talks about how her pact and her power source influences her. It talks about her book. There's a basic timeline, and then it talks about a more direct timeline in with the actual setting. And then you have this patron quest giver type tables. Like I said, you can roll on these. And let's see. So you investigate magical thefts at Silvery Moon in the marketplace, and then cover the thief. So that's kind of a quest. So that's or a one-shot adventure or something like that. So this is just a kind of what came about, and this is all came up this morning when I was kind of dinking around on my phone, and I got this idea going, and it's kind of inspired me to create some content. So, I mean, more power to anyone who can figure out how to use Chat GPT to their advantage and to use it for fun and such, and not worry about Skynet taking over the world type thing. Is that's kind of the pushback you get for using Chat GPT, is everyone's freaking out, oh my god, it's going to take over the world. Well, if it does, it's already on its way, and we can't do a whole lot about that individually. But anyway, so this is kind of a, just a creative use for using AI like Chat GPT to create content in Fantasy Ground. So that's really what I wanted to show. I was going to do one prompt here because I want to make her spell book, which was one of the centerpieces here to her existence, is her book. So I want to take a look at that. I wanted to look at, okay, so there's the nature of that. Here's the pact. I wanted the book. Where is the book at? Okay, here's the grimoire. So this is the description of the grimoire. So I want to take that and ask it to make an image, because I want an image of the book to put in there. So create an image of, and I'm just going to hit Control V because I already have this, image of the grimoire titled Whispers of the Gale. It's an ancient tome bound in leather. Okay, and then I'm going to say that I want it to be, I'm going to say expert and detailed. We'll say Dungeons and Dragons artwork. So I kind of want it to have that same kind of feel. And then I wanted to say, I just kind of want like an oil painting, like a digital oil painting kind of style. And then also a little bit of 3D. I mean, I don't want it like a flat painting. I kind of want it to have a little bit of a 3D. So I'll say 3D animation, Octane render, which is your 3D app, art, or I'll say like art, because I don't want it exactly, I don't want it video game like. And then I'm going to say 1:1 square aspect ratio, because that's the actual size of the image or the orientation. So, and then I'm going to mention, please create like the same style as the previous images, because I want it to pick up some of the style and information off the other photos, so it kind of matches. It's not like completely different. So this is going to create an image within here with DALL-E 3. Normally I create all the images in a separate conversation, but seeing that I'm almost done with this conversation here, I want to go ahead and just use this up, and I'm going to see what it generates for me. So we'll see very shortly. So it's thinking right now, and right now I'm using a custom Chat GPT. I call it the 5e Fantasy Grounds content creator. I do have this linked, or I will have it linked after the video and also in our Discord server. So if you want to try using it to create your own content, you're welcome to. You do have to have a Chat GPT account, and it does cost $20 a month for the subscription for it. And that's not bad. I mean, I can definitely deal with that. That's really nice. So I'm just going to copy this, and then I would go into Canva, and then maybe in this particular area, I'll just add another page here and hit that, and maybe make it a little bit bigger, and just use this as some art, and then maybe put a background on it, make it more interesting. But nonetheless, if I wanted to export it, I could. What I can do here now is under this picture, I go edit photo, and I can have it remove the background. So if I export this, it's only going to be the book and not the white background either. So that'll be helpful. And then I can export this, go to download. And what I'm going to do is transparent background is one of the settings. And then I just want to do this one page. I don't want to do all of them because I already have the others. So just that page, and this is the grimoire. So I want to change the title here, because when it renders, I want it to say that. And then go back, go to download, transparent, all pages. Nope. I want to take it with this one, hit done, and download it. So it's going to just download that one picture, and then I could put this in the Fantasy Grounds and use it as an asset. So if I go to this folder, and there's the grimoire right here. I'm just going to copy that, and then I go into Fantasy Grounds, and then in the assets folder, I already have it kind of open, but I'm going to go to images and this campaign folder, and I'm going to open the folder button on the background. And for Sylira, it's Sylira. So here's some art, and I'm just going to paste that in there. There's the grimoire, and then hit refresh. And now it should be in this actual folder under the art, and it is, and there's the book. And then I can create an image record. So let me go over to the images, and it's in the right category. So I'll just create an image record, and now it's part of the campaign. So if I want to, if I'm going to use this as, an asset, I can put it in there, and maybe I'll get a picture of one of these individuals here, and then use that as like put it in the background or something, or maybe just have it floating there, whatever. But it's nice to be able to just whip these out when you need them. And it won't take you hours to build these, like in Photoshop. I mean, Photoshop has some stock art, and they're starting to put in more AI generative stock art in there. So if you own, Adobe Suite, they're starting to add AI to their content too. So anyways, this is just a kind of a way to use Chat GPT creatively, and it kind of gives you an outlet for what you want to do with your time, and also gives you practice on how to use generative tools. And I can't say enough of how cool it is to be able to crank out that much content in probably, if I added everything together, and with all the breaks I had in between, probably about an hour and a half. I had all that stuff done. NPCs, tables, all that lore, backstory, artwork, everything. So that's really a huge boon for anyone that does if you want to do homebrew, this is the way to go. As far as I'm concerned, because it really does speed up the process, and it kind of keeps you active. And you could be sitting at your dinner table, or maybe you're sitting on the can or something. Come up with something that creative, and not just watching TV. I'd rather do this, to be honest, than watch TV. So anyways, you guys take care. Enjoy your holiday. Merry Christmas, Happy Holidays, Happy New Year. And I'll see you guys around next time. And hopefully you guys will be able to play over the holiday break if you have such a thing. I think next Wednesday I'm doing a class which regards working with maps and Fantasy Grounds, but that's all I got going for the rest of the year. I might do another stream depending on how much time I have.